Now welcome to another edition of Battle of the Heroes and Villains, where this time we'll be taking a look at the results of the poll for the Bendu. We'll then see how he compares or ranks against all the other characters we've done thus far, before I then read and respond to some of your comments. But before any and all that, you can already head down to nominate and or vote for which character we do next. Just respond to my pinned comment below with a character name or vote with a thumbs up if the one you'd like to see is already listed. Whatever single comment gets the most votes in roughly the next 24 hours will be the winner and the character we do next. Alright, and now on to the results for the Bendu, where we'll see that 13% of voters gave him an A, 27% then thought he was B tier material, 46% or almost half of all voters said he was a C tier character, which left 8% to give him a D and a final 5% to give him an F. And so when we do all the math here and consider A a score of 5 and F a score of 1, that means the Bendu ends up with an average score of 3.35, which puts him into a tie for 52nd place with Kylo Ren. But since he has more A votes than Kylo Ren did, or a higher percentage of them, that means he gets the nod and takes 52nd place. That's just the tiebreaker I decided to use. And as for my thoughts on this, well, the Bendu kind of ends up in, to use a Christmas term since it's that time of the year, he ends up in the island or land of misfit toys here, or misfit ideas, or ideas that maybe could be good if explored further, but maybe didn't get explored as much as he needed to in order to be up there among some of the better characters in Star Wars. And to explain this or get into it further, let's now move to your comments. But not before once again saying thank you to everyone who votes, comments, and watches these videos, or who watches any of my videos. Also a big thank you to everyone who supports this channel and what I try to do here over on Patreon. You guys are awesome and I greatly appreciate it. And now let's start, as we always do, with the top rated comment, which this time came to us from Jack of All Claws, who said, "We need to see more of him. He's such an incredibly interesting character with tons of potential for world building and learning about the ancient ways of the Force." And like I just said a few moments ago, I think the Bendu comes from the land of misfit ideas, or ideas that could really be interesting if explored more. And of course, there were a lot of people who said the Bendu just isn't seen enough to really be considered a good character. There were even people who said he's not really much of a character, as he is kind of this plot device, which I tend to agree with. There is no motivation to him. There's no real backstory to him. We know almost nothing about him, so it's really hard to really even kind of consider him a character per se. He's just there. He's just the one in the middle. Which kind of brings us to this comment from Lone Battle Droid, who said, "I think the Bendu is a perfect representation of a true neutral archetype. He isn't malicious, and he'll give advice if you ask, but he won't help you either, and he'll destroy you if you make him mad." And, well, I don't know if I'd consider that neutral exactly. I mean, if you can make someone mad, if you can provoke them into action, well, then they are not considered neutral anymore. They are taking a side, they are taking a stance, and if you can ask somebody for advice or ask for help and they are willing to help you, again, that doesn't really make them neutral in the truest sense of the word, I think. There's also an interesting comment here from Aso Akil, who has a quote that says, "The darkest places in hell are reserved for those who maintain their neutrality in times of moral crisis." This quote is what I think about when I think about the Bendu, and I like it. And I do like this quote, or agree with it, and agree that this is a problem with neutrality or with pacifism, that, you know, sometimes you are forced to fight. We talked a lot about this with the video for Satine, where, yeah, pacifism is great in theory, but sometimes evil is literally trying to take over or destroy you, and to not fight back is just allowing evil to take over. And so that's kind of the problem with neutrality. If you're not willing to take a stance, if you're not willing to stand for something, you're willing to let evil take over. Or, as the saying goes, you know, if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. And so, you know, I like the idea of the Bendu concept. I like the idea that a creature, or whatever he technically is, wants to understand the full mystery of the Force from both sides. He doesn't want to, you know, have a dogmatic view. He doesn't want to look at it from this side or the other. He wants to see the full thing. Which then brings us to this comment from the Charles Jackson, who said, "As much as I love him, he goes against Lucas's version of Star Wars. True balance is the eradication of the dark, not there being a middle ground in which both are evened out." And this is not exactly what balance is in Star Wars. It's not the eradication of the dark side itself. It's the eradication of those who would use it. Balance in Star Wars is basically a system working as intended. And I compare it a lot to the human body, where you don't need a certain amount of illness or sickness. You don't need a certain level of cancer in your body. In fact, your body works at its best when there is no cancer, when everything is going as it should. And your body also has a defense system. It has an immune system that fights back against infection. It fights back against cancer. But when there is none of that present, it remains dormant. And that's kind of the idea between the Jedi and the Sith at the same time. When there are no Sith, the Jedi, in theory, should sort of remain dormant. They shouldn't be out there being proactive per se, because an overactive immune system can also lead to issues. And so anyway, no balance in Star Wars is not about equal darkness and light. It's not about finding some sort of balance between the two. It's certainly not about finding a balance between Jedi and Sith, or an equal number of them. Think about how kind of ridiculous that would be. I mean, think about that in real world terms. It's like saying, we would need a certain number of power-hungry, bloodthirsty dictators in the world who do horrible things in order for there to be balance. I don't think anybody with a rational thought in their head would argue we need horrible, horrible dictators who seek to rule and control and dominate people. Which is basically what the Sith are, or seek to do. They seek to rule and control by using the dark side of the Force. However, the dark side in itself, it's not inherently evil. It just is associated more with the darker aspects of life. It's associated with things like death and destruction, which sometimes are a necessary part of life. You look at a forest fire. On the surface, it seems horrible. Everything dies. However, from that death, new life grows and emerges. And so yes, something like a forest fire, something like fire, can be beneficial. However, using fire to do something like burn down a city, not so good or beneficial. Basically, the best way I can put it is that death has a place and a purpose in the circle of life, but something like murder does not. So yes, the dark side has a purpose. It does not need to be eradicated. It just should not be embraced. It should not be used. This gets highlighted beautifully in the Yoda arc of Season 6 of Clone Wars, where he acknowledges, I have darkness within me, that darkness exists, that darkness has a purpose, but he is not going to embrace it. Anyway, let's get back to talking about the Bendu, and start that out by getting to this comment from Darth Malik, who said, he's a very interesting character, but unfortunately a lot of fans either don't know him or are not as invested in his character because people generally don't respect Rebels as much as other Star Wars content. And I agree with this. A lot of people don't even know who or what the Bendu is, and I don't mean that in terms of not understanding him because they've seen him and don't understand him. I mean, they just haven't seen Rebels, or they don't want to see Rebels, or they don't really respect Rebels, if you will, as you kind of put it here. And so they don't really have any interest in this character. And so I do think he needs to show up somewhere else, and he needs to be explored and explained further if he is going to become, again, something besides a kind of interesting idea that really isn't explored to the point where it can become a good idea. Alright, and moving on now, we have this comment from Deep Dive, who said, the Bendu was a super interesting character as a figure representing nature, not dark side or light side, not empire or rebellion, just a creature living in its home, giving advice or help sometimes, but mostly just wanting to be left alone and not disturbed. He's like a more reactive, violent version of Tom Bombadil from Lord of the Rings. Really cool character from a really great Star Wars show, though. I rank him a solid B. And I kind of agree and I kind of disagree at the same time, because the Force itself is nature. It's, created by life. Life makes it grow, as Yoda has basically said. And the Force is darkness and light. It is, the darker sides of existence and life and nature. And it's also the lighter side. So if the idea is that the Bendu is supposed to kind of incorporate just the Force itself, and that is why he is more neutral, because he cannot favor one side or the other, because he is both sides. I mean, that is an interesting idea. I just don't know how exactly you bring that into a story without him having to, of course, take a side, which he basically does in the show. And so all in all, I think it's an interesting idea for sure. And I think there would be creatures or beings like this that could exist that just encompass the entirety of the Force itself. However, the way it's implemented in the show, I don't know if it makes sense. I don't know if claiming to be the one in the middle makes sense. he should just claim to be the one who is. That would make more sense, that he is the Force. He is dark and light. He is all of it. And he doesn't have any sort of side. He just is the Force. He is a manifestation of the Force. And he's not going to help. He's not going to hurt. You can't provoke him. You can't get him to help. He just is somebody who exists to exist, essentially. Okay, and enough rambling out of me. Let's now just get to a few final comments before wrapping this up. Starting with this one from a random elite who said, "He reminds me of the father/son/daughter, something that hints at how mysterious the Force still is. Yet because of his source material and lack of screen time, doesn't truly shine as a character, and so unfortunately is a bit of a footnote, so he is a solid C for me." Then there's this one from Aviation who said, "C, he was the exact kind of consistent, wise character you'd expect of an ageless Force being living on an empty planet." Also, we have this one from Chris Hall who said, "He's more of an idea than a character, but he's incredibly interesting. A for interest." Next up, this one from Connor Grynall who said, "He reminds me of the owl spirit from Avatar: The Last Airbender. Someone with great wisdom who doesn't want to get involved in mortal affairs. The difference being that the owl spirit was unwilling to share his knowledge, while the Bendu he just doesn't want to involve himself directly." Also, we have this one from Eli G who said, "Despite how little we see of him, I actually really like the Bendu, from his design to how he explores a unique angle of the Force. And it's one of the few times we see the negative side of neutrality, especially in Star Wars. He's a very interesting character who I hope to see more of going forward." Then we have this one from Hellion Soul who said, "I was captivated every time he was on screen, all 4 minutes of him. Just need more of him and his score will rise. For now, he's simply a C." Moving on now to this comment from Isaac Rockefeller who said, "I think he was and is a great addition to Star Wars. Just like the Force, he is a mystery. He has no allies, he takes no sides, but will assist the lost. I don't think he needs explanation like the Force itself." Also, then we have this one from John DeBenedict who said, "I found him pretty interesting when he showed up, but definitely could have used more of him in the story. I thought he lent a lot of gravitas to Rebels during that season, in large part due to Tom Baker's voice performance," which I agree with, and I loved that. Then there's this comment from Joseph Harrison who said, "Absolutely great concept. I wish we had more of him. He's even more neutral than Switzerland. Solid C simply because he ain't the most important character. However, he did foreshadow Thrawn's defeat, so that makes him better than most of the sequel characters." We also have this one from Quincy Morris who said, "Adding a third side to the Force, the middle, was one of the worst things the new canon has introduced. It's good versus evil. We don't need a giant, supposedly amoral, but not really, space cow." Next up here, this one from Sean Mullen who said, "After watching Rebels, I can confidently say that this is the only character in Rebels that doesn't suffer from being in Rebels. He is an ancient, powerful, knowledgeable, and overall unique Force wielder. He provides a view of the Force wholly different from the Jedi and Sith, which seems like it may connect with the father of the ones. The voice actor did a terrific job with the character, and I feel that the character is unfortunately very underused so far. I very much hope to see him in live-action CGI form, and I have a hunch he may show up at some point in the upcoming Ahsoka series. Solid A-tier character." And finally here we have this comment from Eric Zorn who said, "I do like the role he plays, and it is fascinating to hear other views on the Force, especially from outside the usual sources. However, I feel the show raised a lot of important questions about what the Force is that were never really addressed, then quickly killed him off so we couldn't get a further explanation." Well, that's all I've got for you this time. Now it's your turn to tell me what you think of the Bendu, or what you think of what I or anyone else in this video had to say about the Bendu. Or you can feel free to nominate and or vote for which character we will do next. Either way, leave your comments below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.